send out the bat signal. I don't know what other analogy we can make, but my God, we have an emergency episode of Inside Coverage. He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. And we called everybody together because the breaking news is out. Aaron Rodgers is a Pittsburgh Steeler. It's a one-year deal, according to several reporters with the NFL Network, and he is going to be in Pittsburgh in time for mandatory minicamp. So all of this hand-wringing, Frank, for months over whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Steeler, he is. We know the answer to that. So now we get to figure out what it means moving forward.
Yeah, we all knew this was going to happen, right? Like, for all of the, well, maybe, maybe not, the Steelers had done nothing to indicate that they didn't think Aaron Rodgers was coming. Aaron Rodgers really had done nothing to indicate he wasn't coming. So this had been in their cards basically since mid-March. You could tell where this was going. The game of musical chairs stopped. Aaron Rodgers had one chair left, and the Steelers had one chair left. They shared it, right? Like, the Steelers weren't going to go at Mason Rudolph all year. Aaron Rodgers just wasn't going to step away into retirement, more than likely. Although I did think it was possible that he could just say, well, I'll just wait until September. But that's risky, too. The situation might not be better than Pittsburgh was. So, yeah, this was a marriage that was pretty much always bound to happen.
So this is where it gets interesting, because now we get to do the now what portion of this, because you and I said, and we talked about this on Inside Coverage earlier this week, that, frankly, in my mind, even if Aaron Rodgers is the best version of what Aaron Rodgers has left, I think he's the third best quarterback in his own division. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out what it means for Mike Tomlin, because this is what Shefty tweeted out to me. This is part of Shefty's tweet. Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin loomed large in the entire situation. Tomlin was a drawing card for Rodgers and was happy to work within Rodgers' timeline. He's a major reason Rodgers will be a Steeler. Well, now let's look at the fact that the fan base has started their own hand-wringing over Mike Tomlin year in and year out, because he never has a winning record or never has a losing record, but he also doesn't stack playoff wins anymore, right? Like, this narrative has gotten louder and louder. Now what we get out of this is Aaron Rodgers was the hand-picked guy that he wanted on this one-year deal and was willing to live within this timeline. Is it not fair to question, if Rodgers comes in and he stinks and the Steelers season goes off the rails, this has to be some sort of a nail in the coffin for Mike Tomlin in some ways, doesn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, I could see if it's a total disaster scenario, they go 4-13 or something like that. Rodgers retires in November. Whatever worst case scenario you can come up with, I suppose. But I just don't think the Steelers viewed it that way. I think the Steelers are very comfortable with Mike Tomlin. They've had plenty of chances to fire him, and they haven't. Yes, the fans might
Fair.
be antsy, but the ownership never really has been. So I don't know. But what do you think? Like, do you see this changing the narrative here for Tomlin?
That's the thing. I don't think Mike Tomlin should be fired no matter what happens this season. I think he's a Hall of Fame level coach, and most teams would line up to get him to be their head coach. That being said, if this fails, I do think that will increase some sort of the negative narrative that's around Mike Tomlin. Both those things can be true, because I always thought there'd be this buffer. Like, hey, you know what? Aaron Rodgers was the best scenario that we could get out of this. It is what it is. We're going to address quarterback when we find the right one. We didn't want to reach. I can buy all of those excuses. But when you turn around and you're Shefty and you're reporting that, Tomlin was comfortable with this timeline, and Tomlin really was a big part of what made it happen. Well, now you lose any plausible deniability, right? So if this doesn't work, I do think that has to live at the feet of Mike Tomlin. Like, at some point, you have to acknowledge, as a franchise, you've never been able to replace Big Ben. And if you simply can't replace Big Ben, then you do have to look at the entire organization and ask, why not?
Yeah, and especially Tomlin kind of stood on the table, as it sounds like he might have, for Rodgers, and was willing to work around this. But I also give him a pass, because what other option did he have? Like, this was just, boy, like, yeah, I guess they could have tried to trade for Kirk Cousins, but I don't think that's any better. And it would have cost you a draft pick and money, more money than probably Rodgers is going to get. So I don't know. I get what you mean,
Frank,
now.
What about, will we look at this the same if Sam Darnold absolutely crushes it this offseason? If Geno Smith absolutely crushes it this next season? If those two quarterbacks turn around and have a big year, they were easily attainable for Pittsburgh. So I'm with you. There wasn't a better option in the draft. When I covered it for us, I said that loudly. There wasn't a great option for the Steelers at quarterback in the draft. But if either of those guys I mentioned goes off this year, then you do have to look at the Steelers and say, you sure you were comfortable with Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I mean, they put all their eggs in this basket. Like, this is it. Like, you obviously think that Rodgers gives you a chance to compete more than Russell Wilson did when they went to that's another name that they could have just brought Russell Wilson back. They did make the playoffs with him. Like, it doesn't seem like it based on all the, negativity around Russ and all that, but they did make the playoffs with him. What if it gets worse? Like, because they could have easily brought him back, I think. But yes,
what if Justin Fields goes off? What if Justin Fields goes off for the Jets? I mean, my
that'd
God.
be crazy, especially with Rodgers and Fields kind of flip-flopping a little bit here with the teams. And I think Fields is probably going to have a decent year too. So there's a lot of ways we look back on this at the end of the year and say, yeah, what were the Steelers thinking? Aaron Rodgers, 41 years old. Like this, he was, I think, better than people really realize last year, but it wasn't great by any means. Like you talked about the other day, when was the last time he had a truly great season? It's been a while. It's been, the injury obviously in the middle, but disappointing end in Green Bay, disappointing with the Jets. Do we think it's going to get better with Steelers? Maybe, because they're a better organization than the Jets, but there's a lot of ways this thing could go south. We could definitely be second guessing everything that the Steelers did this offseason.
By the way, as Shefty also points out, Pittsburgh has its own personal revenge tour as they get the Steelers at Jets week 1. We all know that's going to give them a real opportunity there. Also, the Vikings, I think that one's important. The Packers, they're taking on the Bears. Like, there's a lot of pieces out here. But what about Aaron Rodgers? Like, I think you could make a pretty good argument that there's a lot on the line for the overall perception of Aaron Rodgers. As much as we can all, looking at the greatness of his career, there's still something here to play for him, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. Because, look, you don't want to end up like Willie Mays on the Mets. I know that's a really, really old reference for people, but you don't want the end of your career to be this absolute dud, which I think we would have looked back on Aaron Rodgers' time with the Jets as that. Like, he was brought in there to do a job, and it didn't happen. They won 5 games with him starting games, and a big part of that was the injury. I'm not trying to downplay that, but when you look back at what they did to bend over backwards for Aaron Rodgers and to get 5 wins out of it is really, really disappointing. And I think we would have looked back on that time with the New York Jets as a really bad way to end Aaron Rodgers' career. Here he has a chance to rewrite his history. And we do get a little too caught up with, oh, this guy's ruining his legacy. Like, whatever. Like, nobody brings up Michael Jordan on the Wizards, right? Like, it's just kind of overdone, but there's still something
I like to call him Fat Mike. I call him Fat Mike every once in a while. Respectfully.
There still is something to be said about, look, you don't want to go and just be bumbling around in this random jersey, and that's like the last thing people see of you on an NFL field. And I think Aaron Rodgers, like his former teammate Brett Favre did with the Vikings, can kind of rewrite things. What do we think about with Favre with the Vikings? We think about a pretty darn good season. He had a bad final season, but his second to last season was really, really good. And that's how we remember the end of his career, not necessarily the up and down with the Jets for Favre. I think the same thing could happen to Aaron Rodgers, where what if he does take the Steelers to the playoffs? What if he does help them to a division title, which I don't think is going to happen, but who knows? Like, I just think that he has a chance now to end his career on a much more positive note than we saw in New York, which was obviously a big downer for everybody involved there.
It is also fair, I think, to say that it goes one of 2 ways. Like in New York, it was either going to be very successful or everybody was going to get fired. Everybody got fired. I do think that there's something here to the amount of pressure this obviously puts on Aaron Rodgers, the amount of pressure this puts on Arthur Smith, who, the offensive coordinator version of Arthur Smith is one that's highly respected. But that offense last year is a big part of why they lost several games down the stretch, right? Like, so now it's Arthur Smith having to change what he does to fit within whatever Aaron Rodgers does. I already talked about Tomlin, but like, I do think there are transcendent moments that change the way a franchise is seen for better or for worse. Like the Kansas City Chiefs, for all of the winning that they ever did, and they won a lot of games for a lot of years, they were seen differently once Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes figured things out. And I'm not sure that that'll ever go away. Kind of like the NBA equivalent is we didn't care about the Golden State Warriors till suddenly we cared about the Golden State Warriors, right? Like there's this moment where the Steelers come in with such a brand reputation. This feels to me like, I mean, the win-loss, the BetMGM win total right now is at 8.5. It feels to me like if this is a 9-win team or an 8-win team that's just around the playoffs, that's not helping anybody. If this thing goes the wrong way, it feels like the sort of thing that changes the way we talk about everybody involved. And if it goes the right way, the hype around specifically Aaron Rodgers with Mike Tomlin, with the Pittsburgh Steelers, that becomes the most over talked about topic of the NFL season. Like, there is no in between on this. Either everybody's going to suddenly magnify themselves up to the top of the talking pole, or they're going to suddenly all find themselves get fired.
And can you imagine if it is the best case scenario? We haven't talked about that a lot, but what if this is the Brett Favre 2009 season? What if Aaron Rodgers goes out there, does finish top 5 in the MVP voting? I don't think that's going to happen. You don't think that's going to happen. But I didn't think it was going to happen with Brett Favre of Minnesota either. Like, it's at least within the realm of possibility. Now, a few things I want to unpack. And specifically with Arthur Smith, because Arthur Smith, to steal one of your phrases, there's no proof of concept that he has a quarterback-friendly offense. It just hasn't happened. Like, that,
Preach.
it didn't really help any of his quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers comes in, and the reason Nathaniel Hackett was around with the New York Jets, unfortunately, was because basically you're just running Aaron Rodgers' offense at that point. I don't think that Arthur Smith is just going to cede everything to Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know that this is a good marriage, but here's what one thing I do want to ask. Is this too late? Is it, look, we're in the early stages of June. He's going to come in for the mandatory mini camp last year. He's basically missed 2 months of the offseason program. Is it too late? Because I did break up. We talked about this on Inside Coverage a few weeks ago. When Brett Favre did sign with the Vikings, he signed on August 18th. And he had maybe the best season of his career, just joining midstream. Like, I think we overrate it a little bit, but I know you're on the opposite end of that where you think, hey, you're not there. You're missing valuable reps. You could have been working with DK Metcalf every day. You could have been working with some of these younger guys that you're going to be throwing the ball to. Is it too late, Aaron Rodgers joining in mid-May right before the minicamp, for him to kind of, him and Arthur Smith to start working together and just overall, like Rodgers having a comfortability with his teammates, Mike Tomlin, the whole Pittsburgh system?
I think an offensive coordinator with the quarterback coming in at the last second has to be totally flexible. They got to be willing to do just what that quarterback loves to do. Right. And I think it works
and
particularly.
Aaron Rodgers has bullied everybody into that. I don't, bullied is a strong word. I get that, but you know what I mean. He did it with Matt LaFleur too. He's like, we're not doing motion. Screw that. I don't like motion, so we're not doing it. Stuff like that. I don't know how that works with Arthur Smith.
Think about the type of quarterback Favre was too. Like a gunslinger that's going to run around and just make a throw, right? Like it doesn't really matter what the play is in the offense. He's going to make a throw. I think that can work in this situation. Like that can work in that situation. For the Steelers to make it work, Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith are going to have a ton of compromise. I genuinely believe that. Is it too late to make it work? Of course not. But let's also be honest. When it's not working early in September because there's not going to be enough preseason reps, there's not going to be enough practice reps, like all of these things. When this thing starts slow, we're all going to have a little bit of context and patience. And then as it gets better throughout the course of the year, what we're going to have to ask ourselves, especially for a team that does have a win-loss total right now of 8.5, right? Like that is the projection. Man, if this team wins 8 games, do I think it's going to be fair to sit back and say, could they have won 10 if they'd have gotten this worked out before the draft? I think that's a fair conversation. And when you are a coach that's constantly chastised for only winning 9 games every year, all of these little things matter in a division that's really stinking good. Is it too late? No. Can this team go out and surprise everybody? Can they find magic? Yeah, you have an incredible quarterback with an incredible football mind, with an incredible head coach with an incredible football mind. If they can get out of their own way, yeah, I think it can work. Is it too late? I think it's going to be fair at the end of the year to remember the time frame that was involved in this. If the Steelers start slow and lose a game or two that they shouldn't have lost early in the season because they're knocking the rust off of Aaron Rodgers and trying to figure out the timing with DK. I just think that's fair.
And I think the narrative would end up being, was this all worth it? Because, like you said, they passed on other options. They could have brought back Justin Fields. They could have brought back Russ. They could have been aggressive for Darnold or Geno. There were a lot of options out there that they either fell short of or just didn't want. And we're going to look back if this doesn't work out, or it just works out, like you said, if they go 8-9 or 9-8 and miss the playoffs or whatever, we're going to look back and say, was this worth it? Because you basically put everything on hold for a quarterback who's 41 years old. And I tell you this all the time, and I'll continue to say it. Just because Tom Brady was good at 45 changes nothing. He was the one. That's it. He was Nolan Ryan, still throwing 100 miles an hour in his mid-40s. Nobody else has done this. Even Favre is, I think that great season he had with the Vikings was at age 40. The history of age 42-year-old quarterbacks and older is Tom Brady, and that's it. Everybody else hits the expiration date. So putting all of this on, hey, well, Aaron Rodgers, well, whatever. Who cares that he's going to turn 42 in December? Well, there's no history of anybody doing well other than Tom Brady at that age. So I think that you would look back if this doesn't work out, if they don't make the playoffs, you're going to look back and say, was this worth it? You didn't do anything to further yourself for the future. He's on a 1-year deal. You didn't make yourself any better. You had 9 wins last year. You have 9 wins this year. I think you might have had 10 last year, but really you didn't push the boulder forward any. And you put the entire franchise on hold for a few months. Like you said, Tomlin stood on the table, but for what? What did you get out of this? And I think that's a real possibility by the end of the year where we're just looking back and saying, this could have been handled in a much different way. Did you not see the warning signs here? Did you not see the Jets just go 5-12? And so I think there's a lot of ways.
5-12.
Like you said, like even if it goes mediocre, let's say they finish 9-8 and miss the playoffs. They've done that before. Like we wouldn't look, I don't think, upon that as a successful season for Aaron Rodgers and Steelers. And then you just say, well, was it all worth it? Like, why did you put all your eggs in the 42-year-old's basket?
It should also be noted that the Jets were terrible last year, and that offense did include a Devontae Adams that I'm being told now I can't give up on because he's still got a lot left in the tank, and that's why reason to be excited. It included Garrett Wilson that's supposed to be one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL. It included a running back room that was supposed to be absolutely elite. Like, there were weapons on that 5-12.
And
it
there's
included
none
a
for the
defense
Steelers except DK.
I mean,
look at the Steelers depth chart. Woo, it ain't good. Like, this will be, and Rodgers has made chicken salad out of you-know-what earlier, often in his career and elevated guys. But you look, and it's like, all right, after DK Metcalf, who do we got? What, you're trading for Jonnu Smith? Like, really? That's your answer? Caleb Johnson out of the 3rd round? He's going to carry your running game? Maybe. I don't know. But yes, to your point, like, the Jets on paper, like the Jets are a tire fire. We all know that. As a franchise, they're just miserable and they could screw anything up. But they had vastly more talent on offense than the Steelers have this year. I don't think there's any doubt. Nobody could question that. So Aaron Rodgers has to go in midstream in June and try to get all these guys. Again,
he's got to do more. He's got to actually be more to the Steelers than he was for the Jets.
And that's not a good spot to get the
success that they want.
Yep.
Yeah. 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers. Look, the one thing I can assure you is that this was an important early conversation because we're not going to talk about Aaron Rodgers anymore for the rest. I kid. It's going to be one of the number one stories. The NFL had to know it was coming, given the amount of huge primetime games. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but my God, everything lines up now well for the league, for the Steelers, for Aaron Rodgers to make sure that it's going to be talked about ad nauseum. And I'm sure Inside Coverage will have you covered every step of the way with all the Aaron Rodgers takes you can have. We're going to go back to eating our sandwiches now, and we're going to figure out what all of this means. But in the meantime, thanks for hanging out with us. Be sure to stick with Yahoo Sports for more breaking updates.